All right, the Obama administration is urging Congress to support its plan to overhaul financial regulation. But is this plan too radical to pass? Bloomberg columnist Kevin Hassett thinks so, and also some members of Congress on the extreme left agree. He is the American Enterprise Institute's Director of Economic Policy Studies. He joins us now from our Washington bureau to tell us why he agrees with Barney Frank. Kevin?
Hey, that's right. Barney and I are on the same page for once. But frankly, the administration really overreached, and their financial regulatory plan doesn't make much sense at all. I wonder if an intelligent person read it before it went public. It really has two parts: a big expansion of consumer protections that was so intrusive and so big government that Barney Frank said, now hold on a minute, fellas, we got to reel this thing back. And then the second part is a too big to fail plan that just doesn't make any sense at all. They say they're going to have harsh new regulations and capital requirements for firms that are too big to fail, but they're not going to have a list that tells anyone who those guys are, because they recognize that if you'd say who's too big to fail, then all the guys who aren't on that list might go under.
Let's talk about the first part first, the Consumer Financial Protection Agency. We've got the quote up here from, or we had the quote up there for a moment from Barney Frank, pointing out the fact that he wants some changes. Merchants, retailers, and other non-financial businesses will be excluded from the regulation and oversight of CFPA. And he goes on to say that he's going to exclude other kinds of businesses, doctors, for example, telephone carriers, which it seems to me should be the one people that we have this act for. Will we see some serious changes here?
Oh, absolutely. They're not going anywhere near the president's proposal. Look, Barney got it right. The president's proposal was so broad that pretty much any time anybody extends credit, so if the furniture company lets you buy a couch on layaway or whatever, then, you know, Geithner's going to be on their case. And so it makes sense to reel that thing back and focus it more on the right target. And so I think that's probably what's going to happen. And I would expect that Barney's going to be pretty aggressive and that we might well see a bill this year.
In any case, your point is that this first part of the financial regulation overhaul is annoying, where the second part could be really disastrous for the economy, right?
Right. Well, moreover, the second part of their plan just doesn't make any sense. That's where the sort of stupid part comes from, because, frankly, they're saying that they're going to have these really harsh requirements for firms that are too big to fail. So one would presume if there were harsh requirements, then you might, say, be able to open up their books and figure out whether they had been imposed or not. But then, on the other hand, they say they're not going to tell anyone who these guys are. So what are they going to do if some little bank says, hey, everybody, guess what? The government said I'm too big to fail. Are they going to say, no, they're not? They're not really on the list? If they do that, then very rapidly the list will exist, and they admit that we shouldn't have a list.
Well, but exactly. I mean, this is clearly a case where we can compile a list if we know which banks are subjected to these harsh regulations. Is it really the Obama administration's plan that's the problem, or do you think the Treasury Secretary just had a difficult time presenting it to Congress?
No, I think it's the plan. It's not Geithner's testimony. It's the plan. And, you know, there's been a lot of criticism of the Obama administration for not having a health care plan, and I think, or even not having a stimulus plan. They haven't really been flush with plans, and I think now that we've seen what happens when they actually devise a plan, we understand better why they made that choice.
The interesting thing also, which we talked about a lot on the day that Tim Geithner was providing this testimony, was that they say they won't be bailing out necessarily, or by definition, these too big to fail banks. But is it really the case that we're going to look at a lot more and maybe even a lot bigger Fannie and Freddies here in the form of banks that are too big to fail?
That's exactly what their plan seems to be. At least that's what the result of the plan will be. And the fact is, if we think back to the circumstances of the last year and remember that there are all these things that they didn't let fail, then you'd have to say, what exactly is the circumstance in the future where one of those guys that we didn't let fail this time we're going to let go under next time? And maybe, you know, they've had some midnight sessions where they've had too many Twinkies where they've thought of some scenario where that might occur. But for me, I can't think of one. I think that everybody who's subject to these harsh regulations is going to be too big to fail, and we're creating just a web of Fannie and Freddies that's going to make a bigger financial crisis the next time around.
All right, Kevin, thanks very much. I've got to point out, as always, that Kevin is a Bloomberg columnist. He is Director of Economic Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, and the opinions he expresses are his own and not necessarily those of Bloomberg.